Nomen mihi est sky Shirley. I'm really passionate about making sure that Latin teachers have a diverse array of authors to choose from so that our students can see themselves represented more fully in the texts. And really in no subject is there more of a stark difference, I believe, than in classics between access to male authors and access to female authors. So in the spirit of a shifting sea change in our field and a real clamor that I'm hearing from teachers about the need for change and the desire to learn more about it, I decided to make this video. So I've been seeing on YouTube that there are these videos called book hauls, and a book haul is essentially when you share your shelf with people. And so I am going to share with you my top 5 books that I believe every Latin teacher or Latinist should own, and that are really important starting points to understanding these issues and to getting them right into our classrooms or into our research as soon as possible. So the very first one that I would like to share, I'm going to have them be 5, but what I'll do is I will kind of have them be like a typical, ranking system where I'll go from like the honorable mentions to the winner, the book that I think is the most essential, at least for me in my teaching. So I'm going to start off actually with 2 honorable mentions, and then I will go into the ranking system. And I apologize for the airplane or whatever it is outside. So the honorable mentions go to ABC-Clio publishers. They've created 2, as far as I can tell, it seems as though there might be other ones in the work, but 2 really essential Encyclopediae for teachers. So you have first off, Women of the Classical World, at the Ancient World. And what I love about this is it's an encyclopedia not only of specific women, but also of so many women who didn't go down in history and the issues that impacted their lives. So for example, you open it up, it's a pretty thick book, as you can see, pretty heavy. And the very first entry is abortion. So they're dealing not only with the women whose stories are handed down to us, but also the women whose stories remain to be articulated or attributed to a specific person. They've got also entries on, for example, the Amazons, so mythological women, and looking at how authors treat them, both female and male authors. They have Jewish prophets. They have, rebels like Boudica, or people who are considered martyrs, Perpetua, and Felicitas, as well as, very, very famous Romans, all the way up through to Cleopatra and Berenice. So I really recommend this. I think it's a heavier book, so it's definitely not something to just pack for the road trip, but it's been an indispensable resource, and I cite it a lot in my own classes and my own research. So I definitely recommend it. The whole series seems amazing. They have a 2-volume one for medieval women, or women of the Middle Ages, I believe it's called, which I have already ordered. So I'm excited to get that. And then this one I love. It's Encyclopedia of Women of the Renaissance. So this is essential because so many of our prolific, probably our most prolific Latin authors whose works survive come from the Renaissance, that period. And so this unfortunately is only limited to Italy, France, and England. But what I love about it, as you can see from all the different spaces that I've flagged, is that they have so many women who you just never would have thought of or would have come across in your own kind of research on Google. So I love it because I'm seeing, for example, in here a lot of names of streets in Italy, street names that I recognize and that I didn't realize were affiliated with famous families and the famous women in them. So it's great too because if you're curious about a specific area in one of those countries, you can look in the index and see, for example, like specifically women of Florence and who in the encyclopedia it refers to. And then similarly to the other volume on the ancient world, they'll have, for example, like a whole section on religious reform. Or they'll have, witchcraft, that kind of stuff in the index. So another really great one and a good one to have for your classroom so that students can look through and realize, wow, none of these women have famous names and I've never read any of their writing, but they're still out there. So those are the honorable mentions, is literally anything by ABC-Clio, but especially their encyclopedias of women's history are incredible. So I really recommend them. Fifth place goes to Magna Docta. I'm sorry it looks sort of sad. It's from the library, so it doesn't have its cover. But this is a great resource for those of you who are teaching Sulpicia. It describes a lot about what ordinary life was like for women who were educated or women writers in the Roman world. And what I really like about it is that it fills in a lot of gaps. So it has, for example, sections that articulate why women didn't have access to learning at the same rates of men, and looking into their reading habits, looking into the genres that educated women chose to read in, what it was like in terms of access to libraries in the ancient world. So I love this because it honors not just writers, but also readers, and really gives us a much fuller picture of educated women in the Roman Republic. So I love it, Matrona Docta. In fourth place, there's a book that's not specifically for classics teachers, but that I have marked up so much, and that has definitely helped me prepare, for example, my women writing Latin classes. It is a primer for teaching women, gender, and sexuality in world history. And I love this book. It's really thin and small. It's super accessible online, but what I really love is it teaches us the historiography that we need to know as teachers when we're making these choices about who to add to our classes. It addresses head on, for example, the challenge of having to take some authors out in order to put some authors in. And it has you kind of work through it. It's almost like a workbook, even though it doesn't have space to be doing these exercises. It's a lot like a workbook because it will give you prompts and it will give you certain tasks to do as you're creating your syllabus or as you're sort of fleshing out your classes. The best part in COVID life is that they have a whole section on how to teach a course on women in history using digital media. So how to do that online and with distance learning. I couldn't come at a better time. So I really like this book. And I think it's also like a really valuable gift to give other teachers in the humanities. So if you know somebody who's starting out as a teacher or who maybe just wants to get into having more diverse voices in class, it's a solid contribution to their library. My third up, it's crazy to say that this is my third up because this was my first choice probably if I had made this video anytime in the last 8 years. But I found some more ones that I love even more since then. And this is Feminine Discourse in Roman Comedy by Dorota Dutch. And I have sent her fan mail before. I would love to hear from her. So this is an amazing book. This book really looks at speech patterns in Roman comedy and the gender differences that are there. So this book will be able to tell you, for example, how women tended to use mea or me, these possessive pronouns, much more often than men in Roman comedy. Or how amabo was more commonly used by women, whereas quasi was used by men. So those are really helpful to have. And one of the things that I like too is it still goes into like, well, how do we know this about women's speech patterns? How much can we actually draw on Roman comedy as a source of information on how Roman women actually spoke? So I love this book so much. It's nice and thick, and I like too that if you take the dust jacket off, it's still nice and colorful, and inviting hopefully a new generation to look at the genre of comedy in a different way. So this is a solid one, especially if you're wanting to stick to the time period of antiquity in adding these women writers, because I have strayed a little bit from antiquity, and the second runner-up, number 2, is Women Writing Latin. So this is a little bit of a sad volume. You can see that like it kind of looks like a little bit rough around the edges in terms of how it was produced. They're very expensive, hard to find online, and I can't tell if it's like that it's out of print or what the story is, but it's in several volumes, and these are absolutely precious. So what they are is really the only place that I have been able to find extensive Latin writings by women from the Renaissance. So every chapter will focus on a different woman, and they'll actually have the straight up Latin right there for you, along with an English translation afterwards. So they don't do very much in terms of glossing. It's not intended for classroom use, I don't believe. but they usually come with a little bit of an introduction about the woman, and then they'll move into some of her texts, and they'll also give you a bibliography, so that's handy to have. And I've used this as a springboard for searching in Google, because as many of you probably know, it's hard to find these authors' writings on the internet, and especially hard if you don't have just one line to be able to put into Google and really get those results and see the facsimiles and have access to the digitized versions. This one in particular, this is the volume on early modern women, is probably the one I recommend the most, but I hate to say it, it's actually the only one I've ever seen. So if the other volumes are as amazing as this one, you do not want to hesitate. You'll definitely want to get it. This one is, I mean, it's full of feminist writings in Latin that will keep you up at night. They are incredibly eloquent, incredibly beautiful, and drawing on the classical tradition to address the present problems, at least the problems of the Renaissance. So definitely recommend this. It's worth every penny, even though it costs many pennies. And then the winner of them all, if you had to choose one book that you were going to treat yourself with, or going to bill your school district for, or give to a friend who really wants to make change happen in their classroom and in their studies around women writers, I love this book with my whole heart. Women Latin Poets. It is a door stopper, and as you can see from the lines, it's had a lot of being laid flat against a scanner for use and inclusion in my texts, in my classes. So it's divided by time period, all the way from antiquity, looking at epigraphy and inscriptions, all the way up through to the present day. However, I will say there's only one thing I don't like about this book, and that is that it ends with basically saying that women don't write Latin poetry anymore, a fact I know to be false. So I'm excited to challenge this and to write a different version of this, certainly not as well researched, because that would be a very hard and high bar to be able to reach. But I would like to be able to just add to that some sort of appendix that that states that, yeah, there are a lot of women writing in Latin poetry today, and writing in various genres. So there goes my phone. See, living my life. Sorry about the background noise. Anyways, so this goes all the way through many different time periods, and then at the end there's actually a checklist of women Latin poets, which are really great because they'll give you a sense of which library you could go into to be able to find out more. Also, sometimes Jane Stevenson, who was the very, very dedicated writer and editor of this, she clearly, this is a labor of so much love, and you feel it in every page. She researched some things and they just led to dead ends. So what I love is that she's open about it, and she says, hey, I'm gonna need help trying to figure out where this resource is. I went directly to this library, but I wasn't able to find it, even though it was supposed to be in the stacks. So I think it shows, again, like the importance of accessibility, but also really is like a call that invites us to be, to take part in this rediscovering, this great reclaiming of women's voices in Latin. Again, super heavy. It's also a pretty penny, but actually, honestly, really worth it. And yeah, I've read through it already many times, rereading chapters, and it keeps giving. So they do have, there's quite a lot of Latin in it, more translated from the Latin into English than I would have liked, but nobody's perfect. And I still think that the very fact that there's a bibliography and a checklist certainly makes it so that you could find those resources on your own. Okay, so that was my massive book haul. I hope you enjoyed, and leave a comment below, or email me or visit my website at skyshirley.com. And I'd love to just hear what you think about these, and whether or not any of them you own, if you want to use them in your classrooms, and which ones are going to be on your wish list moving forward. Alrighty, well, late.